By now, you've probably heard a lot of these period myths, but somehow they just keep popping up. Hello and welcome. If you're new to me, I'm Dr. Carmen, integrative doctor and health coach, helping you fix your period problems naturally. And if you're not new here, then welcome back. In this video, we're going to be busting 7 common myths about periods. So let's go. Myth number 1 is that period blood is dirty. Now we are starting to speak about our periods more openly, and the whole period positivity movement has gained a lot of traction. I love to see it. But for thousands of years, periods and period blood and menstruation were taboo topics. And in fact, for a lot of cultures and traditions, and even in a lot of religions, menstruation was considered a unpure and unclean time. And it's kind of weird because none of us would exist if it weren't for periods. And not only is this myth potentially dangerous because a lot of us may view our periods as being dirty, or that our period blood somehow makes us unattractive or dirty or unclean, and also people may have been excluded from social gatherings or other activities when they're on their period. But period blood or menstrual blood is actually miraculous. So go with me here. So let's take a closer look at what else is in your menstrual blood. So it's obvious that when you are having a period that you're losing blood, right? But you're also losing parts of the lining of the uterus, also known as the endometrium or the endometrial tissue. And that tissue is super important because it is really the potential nest or home and lining where a embryo would have attached if you were to have gotten pregnant. So you've got blood, you've got endometrial tissue, but you've also got bacteria because surprise, surprise, in the vaginal canal and the uterus, there are bacteria. And that's important for keeping your pH in balance and making sure that you don't get a funky discharge. But if you were to get pregnant, that passing of a baby through the vaginal canal is super important for how that baby develops its own immune system. So those bacteria are super important. But also, interestingly, in your period blood, you actually have stem cells. Now, if you're not familiar, stem cells are cells in your body that can potentially become anything. You may have been told that you can be whatever you want to be. Well, stem cells in your body can really be anything that they want to be. And we are still learning about what the potential uses of these stem cells may be and what potential applications they may have in certain therapies, especially people who need immune treatment. And we're also kind of discovering what these cells can potentially become. But don't you think it's interesting that your period blood potentially could have superpowers? So officially, I think we can say that this myth is busted. Myth number 2 is that the menstrual cycles of menstruators can sync up to each other. Now, I know that a lot of you have potentially had this experience and you're gonna swear by it, and I hope that if you feel like this has happened to you, that you let me know in the comments. But scientists have actually looked at this idea that women's menstrual cycles sync up with each other, especially if maybe you are living in close proximity with other menstruators, perhaps your friends, your family, if you're sharing a room, or even colleagues that are sharing the same workspace, often will report that their menstrual cycles seem to sync up. But when we look at the data and the research that has actually put this to the test, unfortunately, the results did not prove that this is the case. Now, it may be, if you think about it, on average, we have a range of days that your menstrual cycle can fall into. It's possible that over time, there may be some overlap in your menstrual cycle with the people who are around you, but ultimately, if you were to look, you probably don't synchronize your cycle with everybody that you share a space with. And so while it may be possible that your menstrual cycle kind of aligns with other people that you may be in close proximity with, this is more likely related to maths and just the probability of this happening, given that the menstrual cycle is only a certain amount of days in length. And so unfortunately, the science does not confirm that this is a real thing. So until it does, that myth is busted. Myth number 3 is that the menstrual cycle should be 28 days. Now, while 28 days may be a general ballpark figure, and while a lot of combined oral contraceptive pills follow a 28-day cycle, actually only about 16% of people who have a period will have a 28-day cycle. And what's more is that even those who do have a 28-day cycle sometimes will have some kind of variability and fluctuation in their cycle over their lifetime. And so the truth about this is that rather than 28 days being like the gold standard or the thing that all of us should be aiming towards, your menstrual cycle length is a range. It's a spectrum. On the lower end, a menstrual cycle even as short as 21 days is still considered normal, all the way up to about 35 days. And while 21 days is on the lower end and 35 days is on the upper end, it really can fluctuate and vary even from cycle to cycle. And so actually you're more likely statistically not to have a 28-day cycle than you are to have one. And so it is important for you to track your cycle, learn your own body's fluctuations, because even things like the type of food you're eating or how much stress you're under can influence how long your menstrual cycle is. So 28-day cycle, while it may be the average, is certainly not the norm for most people. So this myth is busted. By the way, if you're comfortable too, let's do a little experiment just here on this video and let me know in the comments how many days your menstrual cycle typically is. Okay, moving on to myth number 4, which is that birth control can regulate your period. Birth control pills contain synthetic hormones, which will shut off your own body's natural hormonal fluctuations that produce your menstrual cycle and eventually your period. So while you are taking the active pills in the pack, these are the pills that actually contain the hormones. They're usually a different color from the rest of the pills in the pack, and they're the pills that you take for the majority of the month. While you're taking those pills, you will not bleed because your body is under the influence of synthetic hormones. But when you begin to take the placebo pills or the sugar pills or the pills that don't contain hormones, because at that point in time, your body is not under the influence of those synthetic hormones and your own body's hormone cycle has been shut down, you will begin to bleed. And that's known as a withdrawal bleed. In other words, you are bleeding because of the withdrawal of the hormones. And so because the bleeding that you experience while on hormonal birth control is not an actual period, it's impossible for birth control to regulate your cycle. It is going to give you a predictable bleed, but once you stop birth control, the irregular bleeding or irregular period that you're experiencing before birth control is going to return. So the idea that birth control can regulate periods is a myth. So you can't get pregnant while you're on your period, right? Or can you? Well, even though it is extremely rare to get pregnant while you are menstruating, it's not impossible. Let me explain. If you have a very short menstrual cycle, so let's say if you're on the end of the spectrum that's closer to 21 days, then typically the days leading up to ovulation will be less, because typically the second half of your cycle, also known as the luteal phase, is pretty consistent from person to person. So if you have a shorter cycle, it means that you'll have less days before ovulation. In addition to that, sperm can actually live in your body for up to 5 days. If you have had unprotected male penetrative intercourse on your period and then ovulated within the next 5 days, it's not impossible that you could get pregnant. So your period is not a reliable form of contraception. If you don't plan on having a baby or getting pregnant, the fact that you're on your period is not a foolproof way of preventing pregnancy. Myth number 6 is that you can't use a tampon or a menstrual cup or a menstrual disc if you are a virgin. And the reasoning behind this for a lot of people is that in order for you to maintain your virginity, that you shouldn't be using penetrative menstrual products. And this idea is flawed for many reasons. But first and foremost, the use of a period product is not a sexual act. And so it actually has nothing to do with virginity. However, for a lot of people, they may be afraid that penetrative period products like tampons and menstrual cups and menstrual discs may potentially stretch or tear or break the hymen. And the truth about that is that there are a lot of things that can tear and stretch and break the hymen, including things like climbing a jungle gym, riding a horse, riding a bike, doing gymnastics, and a variety of other things. And it's also important to note that there is a lot of variability in the hymen. For some people, it may just be like a really thin rim. For other people, it may be really webbed. And so concerns about the status of the hymen being a reflection of a person's virginity doesn't really hold up, because a lot of things can impact the status of the hymen. And so it's important to remember that your choice of menstrual product, whether insertional or otherwise, comes down to your own personal choice and comfort. And it's got nothing to do with virginity. Myth number 7 is that period pain is normal. For many of us, we were taught and told that periods are miserable and painful, and period pain is just a normal part of being a woman, and that you must just kind of get used to it. The reason why this is potentially dangerous is because while mild discomfort or pain is considered normal, period pain, especially period pain that impacts your daily life, is not normal and needs to be investigated further. If you are experiencing severe, debilitating period pain, or even period pain that affects your ability to do normal daily activities, if it's affecting your ability to go to work or school, to participate in social activities, or even just to function normally, then this definitely needs to be discussed with your doctor. Period pain, especially severe or debilitating period pain, is a sign that something is not right. And too often this idea that we just have to kind of deal with it and that it's normal leads to undiagnosed medical conditions such as endometriosis and other conditions that can cause painful periods. And so if you are having extreme period pain that is impacting your daily life, then I strongly encourage you to discuss this with your doctor and to get tested for a potential cause. And so I'm curious to know, what are some of the myths that you may have heard about periods? Or maybe some of the things that you've heard that you may be unsure about, or that you wanted to know whether it's true or not. Let me know in the comments section below. And let me know how many of these myths were just busted for the first time in this video. If you made it all the way to this point in the video, please comment "busted" down in the comments. Feel free to share this video with somebody who you think it may help. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your love, for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.